Good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Clarkson and I'm the leader for the garden group. When times are normal, we meet once a month where we have a speaker or a group discussion on garden topics. In the spring and summer months, we have visits out to gardens, which usually involves quite a bit of coffee, cake and lunch. During the last year, when we have been limited to keeping local, one of the great pleasures has been to walk round Ravenshead, peering nosily into everyone else's gardens and thereby getting inspiration for our own. At the moment, the hellebores, snowdrops and witch hazel are doing really well. But my crocuses, or croci I should say, are non-existent and I blame the squirrels. This photo shows my solution. It's chicken wire bent over the top of pots which contain bulbs, not only crocuses but daffodils and tulips. But Jill has another solution which seems ingenious. So over to Jill to show us what she uses.
Well, I found this in Timmerman's Garden Centre when I was buying new bird feeders that had been totally trashed by the squirrels, and it's called Hot Nuts. The birds love it, but the squirrels don't. I think it's worked in our garden, so I hope it works for you.
Today we are presenting a gardening question time with questions that have been sent in by Ravenshead u3a members. As most of us don't have acres of gardens, our focus today is on vegetables and flowers which can be grown in raised beds or pots. Our panel from the garden group comprises me as chairman, and I will put your questions to 4 garden group members. Judy, Linda and Jill are all on screen, and Brenda, who can't be with us on Zoom today, but she sent in her answers. At this point, I must emphasise that we are enthusiasts rather than experts, so we give absolutely no guarantees at all. Our first questions are to Linda. The first question, Linda, is from someone who says, I've noticed that TV gardeners are using raised beds and pots to grow vegetables. What would you suggest I can grow successfully, and how deep should I be planting? And also, another member has said, my 2 raised beds have had the same compost for several years. Do I need to replace the whole lot this year? Over to you, Linda.
Right, well, that's a number of questions, but first about the size, really. I've noticed too, raised beds can vary quite considerably in their height. My raised bed is over 2 feet high, and that's great for me because that means I can sit on the side of it and garden sitting down. The width of it is about 1 metre, which means that I can stretch across it. I don't need to walk to the other side, and it's 5 metres long, so it's quite long. The soil in it was made up of the turf, which was underneath it, was just put in it, and then topsoil, and then compost. So just to address the soil issue, I have my own compost bins, and I just put compost in every year. I think with the garden, really, we can't expect to get unless we put into it. Now, as regards what you would grow in your raised bed, just grow anything that you like, really. I find good in my raised bed, I like chard because it looks pretty. You can get the red, the gold, the mixture in its, and the white one, which is a mixture. I grow pak chow because that will overwinter. Sugar snaps, broad beans, French beans, carrots are good because the soil is sandy. Courgettes are good, and they're quite good at the end because space-wise they can hang over. And you know, you can do succession growing because the monge too, or the sugar snaps, I can sometimes get 3 lots in there over a season. As for pots, really, they're a bit similar. I grow spring onions in there, lettuce, cut again, spinach. I grow potatoes in pot. I just put the one potato in each pot rather than being greedy and say putting in 3, because out of that one potato you will get more tubers on it.
That sounds brilliant, Linda. Can I ask you about drainage? Do you have to have any holes anywhere for the water to escape in the raised beds?
No, I don't know. The pots I probably have on, I raise them up on bricks so that I've got holes in the bottom and they'll come out. I realise you asked me about the depth of seeds, Elizabeth. Well, the depth is just really as it says on the packet. And the other thing is, of course, if you have a bed as high as I've got, naturally you wouldn't put in runner beans, because it would be a matter of getting to the top to pick them. So you probably wouldn't grow runner beans in your raised bed.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Right, our next question is to Jill. When visiting other people's gardens and on televisions, the dahlias look beautiful, but mine don't have many flowers. Where am I going wrong?
Well, I've only recently, the last few years, come to love dahlias. They were traditionally thought of as the flower that people grew on allotments as cutting flowers, but now I have them throughout the whole garden. They flower all summer and well into the autumn, but you do have to keep deadheading to prolong the flowering, and sometimes it's difficult to tell which dead flower bud you're taking off and which are the new ones, but the ones you have to take off have a slightly more pointy look to them, but you do have to keep deadheading, and that encourages more and more flowers. So after the first frost, perhaps in about November or even December, the leaves will go black and drop to the ground. And that's when I cut them back to the ground, and I cover them with some compost or a little bit of earth around them. And then always remember to leave a marker of where they are. They do need staking, so I usually leave my stakes there. I have a particular favourite, and it's called Wine-Eyed Jill. It's yellow with a red centre, and that causes quite a lot of hilarity in my garden.
Thank you, Jill. And what would you suggest feeding them with?
I just use a general feed that you can buy for everything in the garden, a rose fertiliser feed that I mix in the watering can and just pour it into place.
That's good, thank you very much. Our next question is regarding tomatoes. So I'm going to ask Judy. The question is, I haven't got a greenhouse. Can I still grow tomatoes successfully?
Yeah, you can. You can still grow tomatoes. Our dining room faces west. So in the past, we have grown ordinary tomatoes in a pot underneath the dining room window. Facing west, you get lovely warm. The brickwork warms up and that feeds back to your tomato. And we have successfully done that. But we do grow them every year in hanging baskets, only they're not hanging baskets we use. They're like the hay lofts, about 2 foot long, and they bow out, the wrought iron ones. And we put 2 tomato plants, one at each end of each trough. And we use tumbling toms. They're like a bush tomato. You don't have to side shoot them. It's a cherry tomato. It crops amazingly. It looks lovely because they're on our garage wall, which gets morning sun and evening sun. So I can see them from the kitchen window and I can see when they're ready. And you just go out with the colander and just pick tomatoes. They're absolutely delicious.
Our next question is for Brenda, who can't be with us on Zoom today, but she's emailed her advice to me. And the question is, my grandchildren love to eat blueberries. So instead of buying them from a supermarket, how can I grow in my garden so that they can pick their own? And the answer is that you must use a liquid feed of ericaceous fertiliser from April to September, and also also use rainwater rather than tap water. So Brenda thinks if you follow those two bits of advice, you'll have masses of blueberries. My next question is back to Linda and her growing vegetables and things in pots. And this one refers to herbs, Linda. The question is, I would love to use more fresh herbs in cooking, but I'm afraid to plant directly into soil as my neighbours have a cat who wanders around my garden. So can you grow herbs successfully in pots, Linda?
Yes, you can, Elizabeth. But just first to say, the garden I moved from, the herbs were in the garden. I hope that at some point you're going to see the photographs. So my answer was these 3 high, quite large tubs, which incidentally are plastic, but nevertheless, I think they look quite good. So the herbs I've got in them are, I grow oregano, marjoram, chives, rosemary, parsley, sage, anything really. The parsley I just replace every 2 years, and the others that have been in there 3 years, they're okay so far. The thing is, don't put in mint. I have separate pots for my mint. I've got 4 separate pots, and I've got apple mint, basil mint, spearmint, which actually I cut and make tea with, and just the ordinary garden mint, but they are in separate pots because, as we all know, they just run everywhere. Herbs don't want a lot of fertilizer. They'll grow in any kind of soil, so you don't need to be all that kind to them. But I think most of them are Mediterranean herbs, like the thyme and oregano, I think, and the rosemary. So they do need to be in a bit of a sunny spot. They wouldn't be very happy in a north-facing spot.
Thank you, Linda. You've obviously got quite a variety in your few pots. It sounds brilliant to have them by the back door. Good advice. Now, our next question is over to Jill about roses. And the question is, I love roses, but although mine aren't dead, they don't seem to do very well in my garden. Is it the Ravenshead soil?
I love my roses and I grow them very well in my garden, both in pots and the soil. So I feed them regularly with a rose fertiliser. I use granules often, especially in the pots, and just sprinkle them around the bottom and then water them in. Greenfly can be a problem, and a tip that my mum used to do many years ago, she used to spray the roses with soapy washing up liquid, and she often used to use the washing up liquid from the bowl when the washing up had been done, so they'd probably get all sorts of bits thrown on them. It seemed to work in her garden. I prune my roses lightly in the autumn, and that stops them being too tall and the wind shaking them around over the winter and loosening the roots. And then I prune again in March. And you can't prune really wrongly, according to Monty Don, but try and prune so that you have a shoot going out from the centre of the rose bush, and prune out the middle so you get good air circulation. I've got all sorts of roses, but I would warn you, don't plant a rambler if you're in a small garden. You just won't be able to cope with it. A climber, of course, and all other types of roses. My last rose that I planted, and one of my favourites, was the Rose of the Year in 2015. And it's a beautiful little peachy pinky colour, and it's called For Your Eyes Only. And I would thoroughly recommend that. You could try it in the garden or in a pot, and I'm sure it would do well.
Thank you, Jill. That sounds very good advice. Our next question is for Judy. I would like to grow some big flowers, which I can see from my windows in the house. Can you suggest anything?
I rescued all my lily bulbs that were dotted all around the garden and put them all in a pot. And they are on a gravel bed, which again I can see from my kitchen window. The perfume is absolutely gorgeous. as you come through the side gate, which sets the tone for the garden, I think. I like smelly gardens. I have my bedding plants in pots close to the house, and I always have a big pot with red geraniums, red or orange geraniums in, which makes a wonderful show. And I do other bedding plants in pots, all close to the house. And again, because they're in pots, you need to feed and water. Feed once a fortnight. I always put the granule feed in as I'm doing the pots, but I always top that feed up over the summer, and Alan waters most evenings.
Can I make another suggestion? If you're looking for height to look out on, I grow alliums and agapanthus, which are tall, and they also, once they've died, they give interest. They're quite structured. I realise that alliums are bulbs, so you do have to be careful of the squirrels.
Can I come in there? Following on from Linda and her agapanthus, they're very good in pots because, of course, they don't like space. They like to be crowded in on their root. It does them good.
Thank you, everyone. That's very good advice. There's no reason for us all not to have wonderful flowers in pots. And next question is to Brenda, who of course can't be with us. But the question is, I would like to grow some peas, but my garden is not very big and peas take up a lot of room. Can you suggest a variety that would suit me? And the answer from Brenda is yes, a variety called alderman is a tall variety which has very heavy crops of long pods which can be trained up wires, or a wigwam, which makes it easier to pick and takes up less ground space. So that's a variety I've not heard of before, but if you want some peas in a small space, alderman sounds the best type to try. Our last question is to Jill. I would like some small shrubs which flower after other plants have finished in the early summer. Can you suggest anything?
I'd like to suggest everybody has a try at fuchsias. I've got some fuchsias in my garden that are the hardy fuchsias, and they lasted well towards Christmas and even after. You can get so many different sizes and shapes and colours of the flowers, so they really are good for autumn colour. As regards pruning, I think they just need a little tidy up. I don't prune mine much. Just when they finish flowering, I tidy them up a bit and shape them a bit more in the spring. And I have a really unusual one that is climbing up by a window, and I can see it from inside my garden. And it's a climbing fuchsia, which is climbing alongside or in and out a climbing rose that I have. That has been beautiful last year, and it's still got some flowers on it now, although they have gone a little bit sad looking with the recent snow. But I do suggest that you try fuchsias. So fuchsias, they just need a little bit of shaping in the spring. But the one little fuchsia that I'd like to recommend to everybody is a very small flowered pretty white one, and it's called Hawk's Head, and that is very, very pretty.
Thank you, Jill. That sounds very good advice. That's it from all of us now, and thank you very much to Jill, Judy, Linda and Brenda for sharing your advice and your experiences. Thank you. Happy gardening, everybody, and just take a note of this photo from Jill of how gardening is very good for you.